a lot of good information, and I think those would be a lot of things in here we can take away and a lot of things worth hearing. So
great. So Brian, welcome stateside. I know it's somewhat tardy, but
Thank you.
yeah,
Still getting used to it, to tell you the truth.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
But at least the hours of the meetings are a little bit more acceptable.
Yeah, I imagine.
well, you're also in New Hampshire, you're adapting to a specific form of English as opposed to the way most people talk.
He who just mispronounced water?
Yes. You just said water.
Well, I said it from Long Island.
Got it.
It's going to sound like a Canadian. Take off, eh?
You hoser.
If you're from Long Island, you'd say water.
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 Yeah.
Water.
And Philly, South Jersey, it's water.
Water.
But is it soda, pop, or Coke?
Soda.
Soda.
Just soda. No pop.
Coke.
Hey, Dan, are you from Garden City? Or Stum, are you from Garden City on Long Island?
No, I'm from Farmingdale, which is close.
Belmore.
Uh,
My
Oh,
dad
James.
used to be in Garden City.
That's why I figured. I knew one of you had something to do because Janet's father grew up in Garden City.
Oh, well, that's where Bob and Ann lived for many years.
Yep.
Right.
Garden City.
I worked there for a long time too.
We were incorporated there for a while.
Yes, we were.
Yep.
All right, almost.
Speaking of Great White North, Hayes Maniato, how's your son doing at UConn?
Pretty good. It's
Awesome.
it's kind of tough. He's taking a break because it's kind of tough to be a music major when you can't
Yeah.
get together in orchestra, band.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of ridiculous, almost farcical that they're continuing, but you know, he's like, yeah, this isn't really one.
At that point, it's like a money grab for the school.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, gentlemen, I've got 10:02, so
All right.
let's go ahead and kick off. If everyone could mute themselves. We have with us today Jeff Dubberly, who is the Vice President of Research at Cygnus Applied Research. He has over 20 years of experience as a consultant and leads a team focused on analyzing fundraising trends, donor behavior, and answering questions to get to the root of issues affecting alumni and donor giving decisions. There's a much longer introduction I could give him, but he's here focused today to go over the donor and alumni perception survey that was distributed to 37 different fraternal organizations, fraternities and sororities, and specifically to speak about the results from a KDR perspective, as well as comparing where KDR's perceptions are versus the rest of the fraternal world. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you very much, Hall. It's such a great pleasure to be here with everyone today. Thank you for inviting me to this event. And as Hall said, what I'm going to do today is provide you an overview of a big research project that was conducted with many of your alumni and alumni from all over the fraternal world, talking about how we can ensure that more alumni give, feel more engaged with their fraternities, and become more participant in fraternal life generally. I've got quite a lot of data to share. Just so you know, please, you don't have to feel like you need to write down everything that I show you. This entire presentation I've shared with Joe Rosenberg, and he is able to distribute it afterwards. I think it's going to be on a server somewhere. He's nodding vigorously. So despite the volume of slides or material, this is available to you in full immediately after the session. So thematically, to begin with, there are a few topics that I know I'd like to hit on. And in thinking through some of the information that I thought would be useful for KDR, senior members, leadership such as yourselves to hear, I thought there would be really good if I could provide you with some of the data that shows how you can enhance the connection and engagement with alumni generally, what tactics, what approaches would help increase alumni's lifelong participation in the fraternity, how you can communicate effectively about your priorities as an organization, what will motivate people to remain linked to you by communicating effectively. And of course, from a fundraising perspective, because a lot of the work that I do has a big focus on fundraising, how can we ensure that you keep getting more donors? How can we make them loyal? How can we ensure they keep upgrading themselves? And you have a strong foundation for any future fundraising initiatives. But of course, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, I know that there is a very important campaign, capital campaign, looming on the horizon that's about to go public. And so a lot of what I think, what I'm going to share today, I think will assist you in facilitating gifts in, but also ensuring long-term success when that campaign is over. So those are sort of broad themes for this session. And I'm certainly going to tell you quite a bit about a very big survey. Many of you will have likely participated in this survey last year, but I'm actually going to start somewhere slightly different. I'm actually going to start in your database. As part of the research that we did with all the fraternal organizations that were part of this study, we looked at some historical fundraising statistics, and I'm going to share those with you now about KDR and how it stands up relative to other fraternities out there, simply because I think it gives you some good context for what's to come from the survey. But also because as I looked at your numbers, I was really kind of impressed by quite a few things. And it was showing me areas where there was some real opportunity for growth. And so I thought it was interesting to put that data in front of you. So to begin with, here is a very simple slide, which just tabulates the number of known alumni that you have. And by known alumni, what that means is that this is an individual that when we looked at the data for at the end of 2019, because we wanted to look at full years and compare everybody. At the end of 2019, you had 26,545 individuals who I thought you could reach out into the world and actually ask to do something. So you had contact information, you had emails, you could ask them to make a gift, you could ask them to volunteer, you could ask them to attend a conference. There was an actual way to engage with them. And certainly, that with compared to fraternities, and I know you know this already, that you're not as large as some other fraternal organizations are out there. You're roughly a quarter of the size, maybe a little bit bigger than a quarter of the average fraternity that is in this year's study. But that doesn't mean that you don't punch above your weight. And in several places, I found that you do. And here is one very good example. When I took that pool of known alumni, and we added up the percentage of them that were actually giving, actively giving to you at the end of 2019, so sometime in that year, 1.9% of alumni were contributing in that year to you as an organization. And that's much higher than the average we see at fraternities generally, where only 1.4% of alumni are actively contributing. So you're almost a third higher than what we see at other fraternal organizations. So already you have a leg up. And in fact, sororities have slightly higher participation rates, so that's why the Greek Foundation scores percentage is higher overall. But again, you're higher than all fraternal organizations as a group. You're an overperforming organization in that fashion, and that is immediately very encouraging to me and speaks to the potential that you have to grow. In other areas where you seem to be doing notably better than other fraternal organizations, and this is much to the credit of the team inside the foundation. If we look at the number of active contributors who've given to you in each of the last 5 years, there was a nice blip in 2018, but generally it's pretty steady. And what you'll notice is that while your numbers have remained fairly consistent over the last 5 years, 2018 being an exception, fraternities generally have started to slip. So they were flat for 2015 to 2017, and they've started to move down in the last couple of years. What you can't see is that if I push this all the way back to 2010, in fact, I could go back as far as 2005, because we've done this study every 4 or 5 years at 3 we've done this 3 times every 4 or 5 years, is that fraternities generally have been in quite a downturn in the level of donor participation, whereas you at KDR have managed to hold on in the face of declining numbers, and that's incredibly encouraging. You seem to have a slightly better foundation and better retention than we're seeing elsewhere. What that means is when we look at the overall pattern of revenue from individual donors, so these are people where you'd ask for a gift from a particular household. So we're taking out corporate contributions, and we're taking out a gift from a foundation if you were ever to receive any of those. If we just look at individual giving, currently about 44% of all the revenue generated by your foundation comes from donors giving gifts valued at or above $10,000 a year. So, and if I sweep that a little bit further along to carry up everybody who's up to $1,000 or more in a year, roughly 75% of all the money you get is coming from donors making gifts valued at $1,000 or more. So you're doing a good job at getting a lot of big donors out there. And what that has meant is that if I look at just the raw totals of giving, so this is the total amount of money raised from alumni over the last 5 years, and here KDR is compared against other fraternities, and because you're a smaller by size fraternity, we would expect you to be smaller on the graph. Notice that your numbers have remained relatively steady, but there is a definite uptrend in there over the last 5 years, as opposed to the fraternities, which have sort of wavered in the last couple of years and are coming down. So you seem to be a group that's moving up when the fraternal organizations are moving downwards, if you take my meaning. And I think there is, looking at the data, some real opportunity. And that as you continue to develop as an organization, there is going to be more and more growth. And one of the reasons I say that is because of this graph here. I've divided up the number of donations you get by some arbitrary gift levels. So these are just nice even breakpoints, $50, $100, $1,000, they're very arbitrary breakpoints. And I've compared the percentage distribution of your donations against fraternities generally. What you'll notice is that you are doing very well in the $5,000 to $9,999 category compared to other fraternal organizations, but you may be lagging behind a bit in the 10,000 plus in terms of a percentage distribution. Likewise, you may be lagging behind a little bit in the 1,000 to 4,999 category, but this is not a negative thing to me at all. This tells me that you are sitting on potentially more potential fundraising from donors you already have. Because if your fundraising continues to grow in the pattern that it is, you should see more $10,000 gifts. Your percentages should rise to the other group, to what we're seeing elsewhere. And that will naturally raise and increase the overall volume of revenue that you're getting from fundraising. So again, an encouraging trend seems to be appearing where you've got this nice, solid foundation. You've been building well, even though other organizations have been slipping. It doesn't look like you've maximized what's available from your existing donors, and that as you go forward in time, you're likely to continue to expand and continue to grow. These are all good indicators to me, thinking about your next capital campaign, but just generally for the health of the organization. And so what you can see from the graph in front of you, which is just your revenue over the last 5 years from donors who are coming from an individual or a household gift, so alumni giving, you'll notice that there is a shift between how much money is being raised from the under $5,000 group to the group that is above 5,000. As we move from 2015 to 2019, increasingly more and more of the money is moving up into the top of the pool. We're getting more and more concentration of revenue from donors giving 5,000 or more. That's good. It means you're securing more major gifts. But because the money is also slipping below 5,000, it also is an indicator that there may be more new donors that we can grab up and put into the program. So there's a double opportunity here, even though you've got a nice strength and security inside the program overall. And then finally, one last graph, and I'm going to get out of the database. Here is the trend of the number of active $5,000 plus donors over the last 5 years, again, this is an area where you're improving year on year, but fraternities generally have been slipping away. So you seem to be in this growth phase, even though you've not benefited from a capital campaign or anything else, whereas fraternities elsewhere are slipping. Now, I know that's a lot to take in very, very quickly, but the reason why I've gone through this is just to reinforce the point that KDR seems to have a really solid base. The foundation seems to be doing a bang up job given relative to what we're seeing elsewhere with other fraternal organizations. The historical patterns suggest that there is good potential for additional growth when we compare you to other organizations out there, and that your forthcoming capital campaign is likely to be quite a strong success when it actually gets publicly launched. Given all that, this is an excellent time to really reinforce the message about what KDR does and can achieve with donations from alumni and how it's transformative to the organization. Because if you do that, what I expect will happen is you will migrate even more alumni into your donor pool, elevate more of your donors up, and see more success and growth over the next few years. So that's what the raw data is telling me. For the rest of this presentation, what I want to do is prove to you that that is actually going to happen. I'm going to use the information from the survey that we've gathered from your alumni, their own responses, to show that there is definitely more potential out there, that your members are looking for ways to engage with you, are prepared to make gifts that are bigger and new, but they need something in return. They're looking for something in order to feel that sense of connection and engagement that will inspire them to make their either that first gift or that next bigger gift. And that's what this whole survey is about, how KDR can do more and elevate the relationship with donors in a fundraising setting, but also elevate the relationship with alumni generally to make them feel more engaged and more connected to the community of brothers. So that's a little, before I launch into the survey, I do want to pause every once in a while when I come to an end of a section, just make sure nobody has any questions they want to ask about anything specific. I will also put some time in right at the very end of our session today to answer more broad questions about anything that I'm talking about. But if you have anything you'd like to ask, please do so. Otherwise,
Jeff, there were
thank you, Paul. Sorry.
I'll say there were a couple questions in the chat. Scott, Alok, if you want to unmute yourself and ask those questions real quick.
Sure, Hall, thank you. So the question that I had was, we have been in a quiet phase of our endowment for the past couple of years. And what are your thoughts that some of those larger donations on the tail end of your distribution that you were showing are a direct result of that quiet phase?
Yeah, and I believe you started your quiet phase in 2020. Is that correct? Or just at the very tail end of 2019? I see Joe nodding. So I think
end of 19.
Yeah, and so the statistic, well, it's possible that one or two had floated in because the cutoff of the research was the end of 2019 where we compared everybody together. There shouldn't be much in there at all. I'm not saying it's not impossible that a couple have landed in, but as you'll see from the 2018 and 2019 statistics of plus 5,000 groups, we're almost the same. So I think it's relatively unaffected just because of the timing of when everything was tabulated. So,
thank you,
Jeff. Question. So a lot of this data would look really interesting, and it's good to see when you compare us to the averages.
Yes.
That we're like you said, kind of punching above our weight class maybe. But if we looked specific, and I don't know if you did this with the data, if you looked at the top quartile or the top decile, and you compared us that way. Mm-hmm. Are we still punching above our weight, or what are those top quartile fraternities?
Sure, absolutely. And I'm going to speak about fraternities, not Greek foundations as a whole, because the sororities have greater participation generally. So if I just talk about fraternities rather than sororities, you are in the top quartile in terms of alumni giving participation. So most, and forgive me, I may not have the percentage exactly right, but the interquartile range, so if I go from the 25%, 25th quartile to the 75th quartile, that is about 1.2% to 1.7%. So that puts you in the top quartile in terms of alumni participation. In terms of revenue, let me just find that slide again. In terms of revenue, you're not quite there yet. Where what you have is stability, but you don't have the level of overall, you're not above average in terms of revenue compared to your size. Because, and if you look at this graph, you'll notice I said before you're about a quarter of the size of the average fraternity, but here your revenue is about a fifth of what we're seeing at other, but that is not a bad thing to my perspective, right? Because what I'm seeing is potential. I'm seeing a program that has potential to grow. If you were right at the top, I'd be worried there was nowhere to go, right? So that is sort of how I'm taking the data here. And there's a lot of information in the survey that will reinforce that for us in a second. And I think someone asked a little bit about how there was something about what other groups were doing that makes them elevated. And forgive me, that may have been your question as well, sir. What they are tending to do better is more fully articulate how donations are being applied and used for the fraternity, and using that as a leverage point to upgrade donors. So they're putting more specific cases in front of people. They have a more fully developed communication structure that feels very personalized. And I think you'll see that is reflected in some of the statistics as I go on as well, from the survey itself.
Thanks.
Paul, did I get everything?
Everything out of the chat. If anyone else has any questions, you can speak now or speak at the next time we have.
Speak at the next one. So fantastic. So you know a bit of the lay of the land. Let me tell you now about this survey, which if some of you may have done this survey, it was very, very big, so you may remember it. As Hall said, there were 37 organizations participating in this year's research. We had 23 fraternities and 14 sororities. Collectively, we reached out to 4.6 million fraternal alumni to participate, and almost 250,000 donors who had recently given to their fraternal foundation. And it was big and it was broad. It asked questions about alumni awareness, their perceptions on their fraternity, their preferences for communication, what types of content they were interested, what motivated a gift, what made them feel linked, what would cause them to give more, and who else they supported and how much money they give to other charities. So it was quite broad, quite big, with quite a lot of intention. In terms of participation, 786 members from KDR participated in the survey. You had an overall response rate of 7.3%. So if the email invitation landed, then we had then 7.3% of respondents actually, of prospects actually participated. And to put that in context, we do at Cygnus surveys with lots of different organizations, lots of hospitals, lots of universities, NGOs, Red Cross organizations such as that. If you were a university and you got a 5% response rate, I would be thrilled. If you were a hospital and you got a 3% response rate, I would be overjoyed. If you were someone like the Red Cross or the Lung Association, you got a 1.5% response rate, I would be delighted. The high response rate is indicative right away of how much your members want to engage and participate with you, that they take the time out to do what is bluntly a very long survey in full, and provide us with information and their opinions and perceptions. This right away, this is an important indicator to me about the potential that's out there for engaging with members because they're prepared to talk to us in the survey. So 7.3% is exceptional in the surveying world. If I were to isolate the respondents just to donors, people who have given to you since 2018, the response rate was over 25%, and more than half of all donors making gifts of 1,000 or more participated. So it's very, very, as much as I think is reasonably possible, it's a very representative and full sample. For those of you who care about margins of error, usually it's only me, but maybe some of you do, confidence intervals and such. With 786 respondents where questions were answered in full, this is a very dynamic survey, so the numbers are changing all the time. But if a question was fully answered by everybody in the group, it had a margin of error of plus or minus 3.4%, 19 times out of 20. And because you had such good numbers, we can look at different groups, and I will show you those different groups as we go. Donors, alumni who are young versus older alumni, people who have given versus those who have not given at any point. We can show these comparisons as we go through. So I'll highlight some of these important links as we move through the data. So with the survey, what I'd like to do is I'd like to demonstrate that there is definite potential out there for growing donations from Kappa Delta Rho alumni. I want to show you some of the strategies that I think are going to work, keep your members connected and loyal, throw some tactics, show you where you're already succeeding and where you can enhance your activities to convert more members. And of course, what I'm really interested in is readying that alumni base for this campaign, because I know the campaign will go on for some time, making sure that the alumni base is ready to support. And also when that campaign ends, people don't just wither away. They remain with you over the long term. So that's kind of those are the pieces of information I'm looking to pull out of the data for you today. Now, this isn't the only pieces of information available. If some of you feel particularly keen, there is a much bigger slide deck with almost 400 slides worth of information available to you. There's a data report with almost 700 pages from every question we asked, subdivided by all sorts of demographic categories that you can have access to as well. So there's lots out there, but this is the nice condensed version, more or less. So to begin, just a few demographics. I wanted to put up a demographic slide showing participation by age of KDR members versus fraternities in general, not because there's a great insight to be gained from this slide, only to show that we have good representation across many, many years. So we have young alumni here, we have old alumni, we have alumni that are middle-aged. And generally speaking, apart from the interesting spike in the 45 to 54 age category, your percentages tend to agree with what we're seeing in other fraternal organizations. So I just wanted to give you a sense of the breadth that was out there. Although that we did ask lots of other demographics questions, the demographic slide that I'm perhaps most interested in is this one. We asked alumni in the survey to tell us their household income. And here we've broken it down based on the value of their most recent donation to you if they had made a donation before. So we have in the purple bars, people who've given between $1 and $99. In the blue bars, $100 to $999. And in the green bars, anybody who gave over $1,000. Now, it's not surprising to see the 1,000+ category most represented by household incomes over $200,000 or $500,000. What interests me is that there are a few people out there giving you $50 who may have very significant household incomes that is potentially untapped, right? We see a reasonable, almost equal percentages of donors under 1,000 with high household income as we do over 1,000. And when I see that, I say, potential. These are people who are already giving to you. They have a history of giving. They've reported in the survey that they have high household income, but they have not yet unlocked a big dollar gift to you. So I'm looking for potential actively through the survey. And this is not the only place we're going to see it, but I'm kind of trying to wet your whistle about what's out there, that there are people there who are really, who care enough to give, but maybe haven't been motivated yet to give big relative to what they could do. Certainly, I will say more about that as we go along. So we asked several questions in the survey where we wanted people to reflect on their experiences with KDR, tell us how they perceived the fraternity. And now I want to show some of that data with you, because perception is very important in influencing whether someone is prepared to become engaged, maintain their engagement, give, so on and so forth. So to begin, we often ask a lot of keyword questions. You know, do you feel that KDR is trustworthy, relevant, well managed, effective? And we do allow the respondents to talk on their own and put their own interpretation on these words. And what I'm really looking for is how high are the scores. When we get scores that are around 6 or even over 6 on this 1 to 7 scale that we used, where 1 is I disagree and 7 is I agree strongly. When we get scores near 6, that tends to mean that the respondent base is very much in agreement with something. And you can see that frequently your scores are in mid 5s, you know, high 5, you know, it's from 5.7s on integrity and trustworthy. It's not that we're seeing a lot of bad scores. It's that there's a fair degree of uncertainty among the alumni base. There's not as much confidence among KDR respondents as we would see among fraternities in general. So it's not that they don't trust you or don't feel that you are as relevant as other fraternal organizations. There's just less certainty out there. And interestingly, that the difference that's appeared between you and what we see in other fraternities is concentrated among certain age groups. So I'm going to show you the same question, but broken down by 4 different age categories. Under 35s, 35s to 54, and then older generations, 55 to 74 and 75 plus. And you can see that there's a real break in certain age bands, you know, and I know it's not, I haven't found the age exactly, but it's somewhere around 55 that we get consistently much higher scores with the groups that are over 55 than the groups that are under 55. And this is why your scores are slightly lower than we have seen with other fraternal organizations. There's a division point there. Now, the survey is not sensitive enough to tell me why that has happened. And from a fundraising perspective, while that may not be immediately important because most donors tend to be slightly older, as you know, when we talk about young donors in fundraising, we're usually talking about somebody in their early 40s. While that may not be immediately relevant for fundraising today, it could become very relevant for you in the future. So this disparity between the groups and your ability to get this younger generation feeling connected, feeling engaged. And again, it's not that they're saying to us in all these categories that they think you're doing a bad job. It's a lack of certainty, a lack of confidence. A greater critique seems to be happening among your younger generations in the survey responses. This comes when, and again, this is the reason. So I'm not going to break down the statistics by age every time, but when you see yourself slipping relative to the group of fraternities, it's typically this is the cause, a difference between generational perspective on your organization. In the survey, we also asked members to rate different aspects of their experience while they were at college or university. And here we get a lot of positives. You know, we get, so we're asking people to reflect back on their time, you know, overall experience 6, social experience 6, quality of connection 6. You know, these are good, strong scores. Again, you're getting in, when you get into the 6s, those are really solid. You have to have almost everybody agreeing positively to do that. A little bit lower scores on things like leadership skills development, but that is usually driven by the fact that your older generations didn't experience these programs. You know, leadership programs, skill programs, academic support, they're relatively new, they're relatively newly introduced in the fraternal world. And so we naturally see these scores lower down. In fact, if I switch over here from everybody to the under 35 group, you'll see that the scores on facility living, skill development, they all pick up. They all move slightly higher. I know I did that a bit fast, so I'll just move back to the overall group and move forward to the youngest generation. So facility leadership, skill development, academic support, they all improved. Certainly mentoring didn't improve on its own. So that might, and I'm not suggesting that should be a program you need to push. I'm just showing you what the statistics are. And again, we see good scores on social experience, quality of connection. Those things remain high. So there is another difference here between the youngest alumni in the pool and everybody collectively. Another area of common difference, this one isn't based so much on age, but it's based on giving behavior. We asked respondents in the study to agree or disagree with several questions about their experience and the role of the fraternity in their lives. So we asked respondents, was Kappa Delta Rho a vital part of their university college experience? And here what I want to highlight is the difference in perception between donors and non-donors. You'll notice that the donors are much more likely to say, yes, strongly, it was a vital part of the college experience, or yes, it provided a vital vital service to undergraduates compared to the non-donors. Interestingly, and this is always the case, the donors are also always more worried about behavioral issues than non-donors are in the survey. And I think they feel more invested in the organization because of their contribution and therefore feel more protective of it. I mean, that's my personal interpretation. I don't have any hard statistics to back that up. What I am seeing, and what is true of yourselves and is true of every fraternity in the study, is that there is a break between donor perceptions and non-donor perceptions. And so to get more people giving, we need to make more non-donors think like the donor group, be more, have more positivity around and more understanding of the impact that your organization delivers to undergraduate students, have a greater understanding of how vital it is to the overall college experience. Bridging that gap naturally puts people more in the mindset for making a donation. Nevertheless, and I don't want to give you the impression that those scores are bad, because they're not, because they are solid. When I look at all the perceptual questions thus far, my overall sense of things is that alumni are saying everything they should be saying to me to make them good prospects to be donors. Your score, it's impossible for me to directly compare you to a university or college client that we may have worked with, but your scores are no different, from what we would relatively see from a university or college. So everything that your alumni are saying make me think that they're good prospects to be donors. They adore you. They're willing to participate in the study. They're looking for routes to engagement. They feel positive about their time at college and university, and they feel that you have enhanced it. So everything is right in the base. And so we then go on to ask them more targeted questions in the survey. And this is where the rubber kind of meets the road, where we start to see the breakdown between what makes a donor and a non-donor become really apparent. In the study, we asked alumni to agree or disagree with these following questions. Are you proud to be a member? Now look, the active donors score, they're way out there, 6.6. It's almost impossible to move that number up. You could make a Herculean effort and you'd only get it to 6.7. But even the non-donors are really solid. That's an almost 6 score. So it's not that there's a lack of pride or affection here. But everywhere else, there's this big gap that starts to open up between donors and non-donors. Is this a lifelong commitment? Donors, totally yes. Non-donors, 4.8. It's not as certain. And as we go down, my responsibility to support other members, my responsibility to contribute charitably to my fraternity, that is the lowest scoring group for non-donors. You can see the disparity that's opened up there. How much sense of responsibility I have to make a donation, to actually contribute. So there's a big, big gulf there, where a huge number of non-donors are essentially saying, no, I don't have this sense of responsibility. I don't feel that I'm responsible to other collegiate members, compared to the donors who are viewing this very differently. And that is one of the important distinctions that makes a donor, that separates donors from non-donors, this sense of responsibility to the organization. As I go on, I'm going to tell you offer some suggestions that we can use based on what your members have said that will help us bridge this gap, help us make them feel more responsible, more connected to the organization. So again, we can turn more of them into donors, but it's not just because it will make them give you money. If they feel more responsible, they're more likely to volunteer, they're more likely to be engaged. It works for everything, right? Even though I have a bit of a philanthropic focus, it will benefit the organization in a wide variety of ways. And you can see that this issue is not specific to age. So I know there's little changes between age bands, but it's not that we have a lot of young people saying, I don't have a responsibility to contribute. We have everybody saying that. So I've again put up the age division here to highlight, in this case, it's a collective issue. it affects all levels of the fraternal organization, or at all times of the fraternal organization going forward. One more thing, and I will pause for questions in case there's anything that's sort of shaken out of this, is a couple of final perception questions that we ask in all surveys. We ask respondents to agree or disagree if Kappa Delta Rho needed financial support. Do you need money? Which is obviously a very interesting question to ask, right? So do you actually think your fraternity needs a donation? Your scores, honestly, are better than many fraternities out there. So that's a very important takeaway. Your average score for everybody was 5.5 on a 1 to 7 scale. There are many fraternal organizations out there, and particularly this is a problem for sororities, who are down in the mid 4s. But there isn't a lot, what we don't have is a huge groundswell of people saying, yes, definitely, I'm certain that, that my fraternity needs financial support. In fact, we have several people saying to us in the survey, I just don't know. A quarter of respondents said to us, I'm just fundamentally not sure. And that quarter grows. If we look only at the non-donors, it increases to almost a third of people saying, I don't know that you need financial support. Now, this is an issue that affects every fraternal organization. If I show you the national statistics, so here is all the national statistics for Greek organizations. The average score is 4.7. So again, you're better off, right? You're better than we're seeing elsewhere. But you can see that the issue is that there's a huge number of not sures appearing in the 2020 results. And I was originally going to show 2015 and 2020 here, and I took it out because it was just so apparent. This is a thing that is affecting all fraternal organizations everywhere. In fact, it's actually affecting every fundraising body, every charity in the world. Wherever we go, wherever we look, there is a greater demand from alumni, prospects, donors, whatever category we're talking about, to get more information about the need and the use of contributions. People are fundamentally becoming more demanding on charities and organizations they love and support for specific information about how gifts are going to be used and applied. And that is true wherever I look. It's not specific to fraternities, but fraternities are caught up in this social change that's happening. And it's only logical. You know, there's more demands in society for specific information. People treat their fundraising much more like an investment in an organization than they used to 10 or 15 years ago. They expect return on their investment. And so these kind of demands are coming through. And so that's why when we ask questions like this one of KDR members, does KDR use charitable donations effectively? Again, your scores are often better than the average. You got 5.4 overall, and well, actually in this case, you're slightly below. Greek organizations got 5.8. Your donor scores are better, are quite strong, but we still have lots of people saying, I don't know. I don't know if that donation is used effectively. And even a quarter of donors are saying, I don't know if that donation is used effectively. So people who have given you money are saying to us in the survey, you know, I love you, I care for you, I think you're a great organization, but there's a lot of us out here who just don't know about the application of that gift. And these percentages are just too high. They're too high. They need to be tackled. They're too high for you. They're too high for fraternal organizations generally. Because the more a donor or a potential donor understands how a gift is going to be used and gets good information on the back end on how it was applied, even though they don't think you're running off to Fiji and spending it on, or wasting money on it or anything like that. It's not that they distrust you. It's that they don't have enough of an understanding about how the gift is actually used so that they feel confident enough to upgrade that last gift or make a first gift. And as I go on, you're going to see time and time again this repeated message of, I don't get enough information. I'm not sure how the gift is being used. I'm not sure if you're a priority because I don't understand what you're doing relative to other things that I might wish to support. So again, just a summary for that section. What I'm seeing in the data is that you have a lot of alumni who love you, who are passionate about you, who value their connection to you. They think highly of your organization. They know you can have an impact on the lives of men and young men in particular, but they're uncertain what that impact is going to take. And they are often prepared to make a donation, but they've not necessarily prepared to unlock a lot of their money yet because they don't get enough specificity on how gifts are being used or applied. But don't worry, these things can be resolved. These things can be tackled. So before I talk a bit about communication and what messaging we can give alumni to make them feel more connected, more inspired, does anybody have any questions that I haven't been paying enough attention to the chat as I've gone on here. Does anything need to be resolved? So,
Jeff, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Do we also have tagged, and if you're going to get to it, I don't want to steal your thunder,
course.
but who are volunteers among the respondents?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to make much. I'm not going to say much about it in this presentation, but in the surveyed raw data, we have created a volunteer segment so that you can follow that group all the way through. So, so yes, we do have it tagged.
Okay. And would you happen to know how our volunteer donor overlap compares to other organizations? So in other words, as I look at these results,
yes,
are they somewhat skewed by having a heavy volunteer base also in our donor base, which would reflect in these perceptions of it's a lifelong commitment, et cetera, et cetera?
You know what, I cannot say with definitiveness that because I need to properly go look, so I don't want to say something that I don't know for sure. But my sense is that your scores are not, when I've looked at the volunteer answers specifically, the statistics that from your volunteers are very similar to the statistics from other volunteers elsewhere in other fraternities. Again, sororities I need to leave aside. So I'm not seeing a radical shift out of the data. But I could do more work to ensure myself of that, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Good, thank you for the question. All right, fantastic. All right, so let's talk about connection and communications, because connection is really important, because connection is the gateway to engagement, it's the gateway to volunteering, it's the gateway to donations, whatever we want. So we asked a question in the survey from members, from donors, members, alumni, everybody. How connected do you feel to Kappa Delta Rho at this moment? What's your current sense of connection? And you could say that it was excellent or good or weak or non-existent. And what I want to show you is the difference between different categories of respondents. That's the thing that really is vital. So if I look at the overall response for Kappa Delta Rho members, 10% said that it was an excellent connection, 22% said it was good, 23%, about a quarter left said weak and fair. If you go one step to the right, which is your active donors, you can see how much bigger the feeling of connection grows, right? Suddenly, the percentage of active donors saying I have an excellent sense of connection balloons to 23%. And if you go all the way to the right, which is the 1,000+ category, 51% of them say they have an excellent connection. 37, nobody said they had a weak or non-existent, or so you can see how important connection is. And we could have a big chicken and egg discussion of whether or not connection came before the donation or donation came as a result of the connection. And I don't know how to resolve that issue. But what I do know is there's definitely a correlation here between how connected you feel to an organization and your willingness to give and your willingness to give big. The non-donors have the overall weakest sense of connection, as you can see, and they're the group most likely to say that their connection is either weak or non-existent collectively. So connection is important. When we asked respondents who said that they felt they had no connection or their connection was very weak, we asked them, of course, why they felt that way. Well, the number one answer, and this is always the number one answer, is distance or time. It's been so long, right? And that's okay. And there's not a lot we can do about that. But the next three things are something that we can do something about. When a respondent says in the survey, my sense of connection is weak or non-existent, And I feel that way because the organization only contacts me to solicit me. Now, first of all, I know that's not true. I know you're sending them information all the time. You've got newsletters, you've got updates, all these things are coming out. What they're saying in the survey is that I only feel personally connected to or contacted when someone is soliciting me because you're asking me to do something specific for you. I'm not getting the sense of personal connection that I'm looking for generally with the organization. And so that contributes to a weak sense or non-existent sense of connection. So that is something that can be overcome. And I'm going to talk a bit about how we could overcome that in a moment. One of the other things that is very common is the respondent might say, I feel no connection to the national organization as a student. And this is a big challenge for all Greek organizations. You know, you have this wonderful, intense experience with other members of the fraternity while you're at university or college, and then you depart. And the national organization tries to step in to bridge that gap by trying to keep alumni linked and engaged, but it's a little late in the game. It kind of feels like a bit of a switch. And so if the national organization doesn't have a real strong presence as a student, when people move on to later phases in their life, they're still looking for that connection to the chapter. And that's why we get that next response. They prefer to maintain a connection with the undergraduate chapter, and that's inhibits their ability to connect with Kappa Delta Rho on the national level. So all fraternities have this challenge that they need to find a way to balance the link to the chapter, which is always going to be the strongest link where people feel the greatest affinity, with a link to the national organization and making sure that the national organization is fully present at the same time. Now, there are several things that your members feel it's important that you do. So when we asked respondents in the study whether or not they thought it was personally important that Kappa Delta Rho achieve different things, sort of provide accountability on performance and conduct, have a good policy on hazing, have a strong leadership program, support academic achievement, all these numbers, many of these categories are in the mid-5s. And so while it's not important to everyone, that means there's a lot of people who do feel it's important, provide scholarships to members, so on and so forth. The reason why I put these up is because I want to show to you that even if your members don't feel at all times strongly connected, that doesn't mean they don't care about what you're up to. And also it doesn't mean that you don't have things that you can hang your hat on and show your members that we have priorities that we know that are important to you and that we can fulfill as an organization. I'm not trying to suggest what your mission or fundraising cases should be. I'm just letting you know there are lots of things out there that could be a mission or fundraising case that you could articulate for your members and that they would find value in and feel a resonance to. Not 100% of not everybody out there, but lots and lots of them as a number. So when we then go on to push them a little bit further on issues about how Kappa Delta Rho is achieving different goals that might be related to some of these priorities that they've articulated to us, like shaping future leaders, like supporting academic achievement, training on life skills, keeping members engaged. You can see we have a lot of numbers which are relatively low, lots of things that are in the mid-4s. And so we would like, well, I would like that they be generally a little bit higher, that members felt that you were doing a stronger job in developing all of these, well, whatever areas you tend to prioritize. And again, this is not a statement on whether or not you are doing a good or bad job. This is whether or not the members know what you're doing, that you are successful in shaping future leaders. And I know you are, I know as an organization, this is an important priority. Supporting the lives of young men, this is an important priority. The breakdown is getting that information out, getting that information into the minds of your alumni. And you can see that you tend to trail fraternities in most other categories. Here we have an issue once again with age, that your youngest members, those under 55, tend to be the most critical of this issue, more so than we see with other fraternal organizations. And a final note on communication. And I always find that this one, well, not my final note on communication, but my final sort of general note on content priorities. we asked respondents to talk to us about your publications, the newsletters, email updates, whatever they had received, and in a general way, tell us what they would like to read from you, what information gets them excited, what fires them up. And the top three things are often very similar among fraternal organizations. Almost always number one is local chapter. I want to hear about the chapter that I'm most connected to. That's that personal connection. That I want to hear about the chapter that I feel that greatest affinity to. Number two is usually updates about fellow alumni, but here it's different for you. Your number two is actually future plans. I've kept this in the national order so I could remember what the order was in comparison. Your number two comment is future plans, and this makes me very happy. This makes me very happy because when I see alumni saying, I'm very interested in the future plans of my fraternity, what they are saying is that I want to know what is happening in a world that I feel a connection to and feel is important to me. By getting information about future plans and giving members information about future plans, you solve a lot of problems at once. You make them feel linked to the organization because you're taking them aside and saying, this is what our priorities are for the future. This is where we're going as an institution. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel a part of this. For many of your members, they're going to be at stages of their lives where they cannot commit to you a lot of time and a lot of resources. They have children, they have mortgages, they have children and mortgages and children who are costing them a fortune at university themselves. They're overwhelmed, they have no time, they have limited resources, but they care enough to complete this survey. A huge number of them care enough to complete this survey, and a huge number say they want to have future plans. The way they can feel connected more than any other way when they have limited time and resources is to know where you are going as an organization. My 101-year-old grandmother, who is currently trapped in a care home, she's even gotten COVID and completely survived it. It's amazing. Nothing will end this woman. When I speak to her, she doesn't want to talk about COVID. She doesn't want to talk about her being trapped in the care home. All she cares about is what my future plans are in my life. She's looking a way to connect with me. How can she get more information about her grandson? The same thing applies here. The same dynamic applies here. Giving future plan information is like putting your arm around your members and saying, you are important. This is where we're going as an organization. I want you to know that. And I'm making such a big thing out of this is because of who's on this call. The individuals, you wonderful people, the leadership of this organization who give your time and your talent to it can communicate about future plans in a way that is so much more passionate, more effective than anyone else ever could. By simply talking about the organization and where you're going and what you intend to do and achieve, you will motivate and make people feel connected in a way that could not be done in any other circumstance. You yourselves, not even by asking for money, not even by asking for volunteering, just making it clear at events in whenever you get a chance to talk to alumni about what this organization hopes to do and achieve and change, that's the piece of information they need. That's what will make them feel connected. And if you can do that in the context of something about this is also happening with our alumni, give them more updates, or this is happening in a chapter that you are at, that's the golden, that's the complete circle. That's what they need. That's what they need to feel connected. And again, I'm so pleased to be with this group because you can convey that information better than anyone, and they will listen to you better than anyone. They're most interested in your opinion as leaders of the organization. Now, when I explore with alumni, these are all the things they're interested in, right? So they're interested in plans and information about their chapter, updates about alumni. The next question was, how effective was Kappa Delta Rho in delivering that information? And unfortunately, your scores are not great. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You'll see how many in the blue bars are updates about fellow alumni, and the orange bars are updates about local chapters. So we just asked them what are their priorities, and then we said, how effective is KDR at delivering this information? You'll notice how many people scored you in the not satisfied categories, and that your averages are well below 4. Almost no one said that they were extremely satisfied with the delivery of this information. We have not as severe a situation with issues that affect the fraternity or future plans generally, but once again, the scores are not high enough. So they know what they want, but there's a disconnection between the information that they're receiving that's going to make them feel linked and connected. So here fortunately we see more 4s and 5s, but we're not seeing it. We're hardly seeing anybody say they're extremely satisfied with information about where you're going. Now you've got a capital campaign. What an amazing opportunity to talk about your future plans, right? What an amazing opportunity to convey this information. And once you've got, and it's not a one and done job. I'm not going to pretend that you can just announce the plan once and everybody gets it the first time. It's that old advertising adage. You have to tell everybody 700 times before that gets in their brain. But if you make that part of the general conversation, if you embed that as the conversation inside the organization, it will get in there over time and make people feel more connected. And then that will help insulate you against post-campaign decline. You know, why would people tend to fall away in fundraising, become less engaged after a campaign? By making sure they're always focusing on something that's coming down the pipe, even if it's not a big campaign, that makes them feel connected and linked to the organization. Finally, 2 final points on communication, because this is an important issue for everyone. It will come as no surprise, given what I've said, that your members are most interested in receiving updates from either other brothers or their undergraduate chapter, because they're looking for that personalization or that connection. They are not as keen. They're not bad scores. I wouldn't expect them to be extremely interested, but they're not as keen of information from the national organization and the national foundation. When we ask them in the survey if they're satisfied with the amount and the frequency of updates they get from the national organization, these are the 2 bars on top, you can see that there's lots of green, you know, there's lots of good, lots of people saying that, yes, I get about the right amount of information from the national level of KDR. Some people do want more, you know, it's not that you're over communicating. So, and that's good. If you were, that would make it very difficult to start inserting other pieces of information, but some people want more, but you can see the difference between national and chapter, right? You know, the huge disparity that opens up in terms of satisfaction with the amount of information from the chapter. Not only do we have more than 43% of people saying they don't get enough updates from their chapter level, we have another quarter saying they're not sure, and I suspect that's because they feel they're not experiencing it, so they don't know. So this is not, even though there's much to be praised about what's happening at the foundation and fundraising and in terms of fundraising development and you punching above your weight. These are issues that have to be tackled holistically by the organization. These are not things that the foundation can resolve on itself. It's going to require an organizational-wide approach to thinking about how we can get more information out of the chapter in an effective way. And to my mind, if I may be rather bold, that doesn't mean that you should encourage collegiate members to start writing letters and shooting them off to alumni, you know, sort of randomly in space. Because we don't want the chapter disconnected from the national organization. We want the national organization present in that relationship, maintaining that link for you, possibly mediating that information flow, you know, so that the effort then becomes clear that it's a chapter national effort to get information and keep the personalization up with the members through communication. So I hope that I'm leaving you with a sensation that your communication strategy, what you say, what the focal points are, does have a big impact on the foundation's ability to grow and raise money. And the more you can do in making people feel more connected, more personalized, more understanding about what's going to happen in the future, the more likely they are not only to donate, but the more likely they are to donate freely and upgrade their gifts because they understand what's going on and feel more linked to you as an organization. Before I talk more about donations, I know, again, I've said quite a bit. Let me pause for a second and ask if there are any questions, anything anyone wants to ask at this stage. If not, I'll tell you a bit more about donation behavior.
So Jeff, a very specific question on
Please,
a
Scott.
slice of data. You mentioned there was a response specific to people who are disconnected.
Yes.
That they say they have no connection to the national as a student.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that's the slide here. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have an age distribution of that response?
Yes, it is more pronounced among slightly older members than it is among younger members. I cannot tell you from my memory exactly what the difference is.
Okay.
I don't want to characterize it as broad. Like, it's not that there's a radical difference between older and younger, but there is more sense of a lack of connection as a student at the national level from older members than younger members. So that's it. But I could look it up and find out. Incidentally, I'll mention this actually, because in the lower corner of all these slides, I should have said this at some point, there's a little Q number. And so if you go into the full data set and open it up and click Q31, question 31, you'll immediately be presented with all the demographic breakdowns on categories. So you could actually jump from question 31 and see the age breakdown right away. So for anybody who really wants to go through my 700-page data report, you absolutely can, right? So that, and there is a mechanism to facilitate it for you. So that's
So Jeff, when you say that,
Mhm.
to go through the data, that wouldn't, the question I think was Scott that just asked,
yes.
that's not gonna be specific for KDR, or is it?
No, it is yours. So in that data
Oh,
report, it's
okay.
specific for KDR, but also alongside it, we've put the averages for fraternities and Greek organizations, so you'd have a point of comparison as well. This is all you. This is your data set. Yeah. So thank you. Great. So let's talk a bit more about foundation giving, what causes somebody to give, what makes somebody stop giving, because obviously we want to keep people giving as much as possible. We asked respondents in the survey whether or not they were likely to give KDR a gift in the next 12 months. And you can see the difference between active donors, lapsed donors, and non-donors. Your current donors are in green, people who were once donors are in red, and people who have never given, or at least never given within recent memory, are in orange. The people who are giving are much more confident of a future gift, obviously, than the ones who have not given recently or have not ever given. In fact, the lapsed people in many ways look like the non-donor category very quickly. I mention this only to reinforce the importance of holding on to a donor once you get them. Once you get them, it's very expensive. It's very time consuming to acquire a new donor. If they become lapsed, they very quickly get to a state where they're not going to give again. If somebody makes a decision to stop giving, it becomes very hard to overcome that. So instinctively, I want to keep people giving as long as possible. But of course, with the non-donor group, we said, why didn't you give? You know, okay, if you have no intention of giving in the next 12 months, what's preventing you? Why are you not likely to give? And we get lots of different answers, but the first two are almost always the same in fraternal organizations. Number one is other charities prioritized. Now, let me tell you how we interpret this. I don't let them in the survey say I don't have any money, because that's not true. So I always force their hands and let the, if you got a computer and you're in the survey, I know you can give me at least $5, right? So I don't want to let people get a cop out with no money. We ask them if any of these factors are reasons they've not decided to give. And when we see other charities prioritized, what they're saying to us in the survey is that KDR hasn't made a strong enough case yet to me about the need for contributions so that I would prioritize my giving to them. As you will see in a few minutes, your donors are actively giving to lots of other charities, and your non-donors are actively giving to lots of other charities. People don't just give to one thing and that's the only thing they support. It's not all money for cancer treatments, right? They're supporting universities, they're supporting religious organizations, they're all over the map. This is all about case. This is understanding what it is going to happen with the gift and how it's going to impact things. The second comment, unclear about donation use. And I've mentioned this a couple of times. Not understanding about how the donation is going to be applied is a big barrier for contribution. So these are sort of more the perceptual fundamental barriers to giving. We asked a number of experiential barriers that might cause a problem in giving. Issues like disappointment, poor student experience, those are always going to be present. What I want to highlight is the difference between weak connection to the fraternity and everything else, right? It is why I was saying so much about how important that connection was there. If the donor doesn't feel, if the alumnus doesn't feel linked, you're just not going to get that gift through the door. And then if they need that sense of what the gift is going to be applied to and how it's going to be used. If you have those three things working for you, your member numbers will go up. What is definitely not a barrier to giving is awareness that you are asking for money. right? We asked supporters in the study if they knew that Kappa Delta Rho had a national foundation that was charged with a fundraising mission, and 88% of them said yes. So look, we don't have there's not an awareness problem here. They know you're raising money, right? They know you're out there. What they don't understand well enough is what you're raising it for, how it's going to be applied. And I can highlight that a bit more with this next slide. In the survey, we asked people about what they think their fraternity or sorority is raising money for. These are very big tent categories, and I completely appreciate they may not be perfect for KDR, but the nature of the big survey requires us to sort of try to envelop as much as we can. And so here are their responses. What they are aware of, or most aware of, is programs that are for supporting individual excellence and organizational development and skills training. They are less aware of programs for supporting students and members in need, and also for capital investment. You can see that they're in almost every category. There's quite a large number of alumni saying to us that they're fundamentally unaware of what's happening in these different categories, that I don't know about these programs being out there. So if you are going to mount fundraising initiatives, whether they be annual fund or capital campaigns, you know that fundamentally there's a better awareness of programs for individual excellence and organizational development. And I'm just going to roll back a slide so you can see the fuller definition of what that means, right? Individual excellence was scholarship and fellowship for students based on their achievement and academic merit. Organizational development was chapter consultations, conferences, management training. Skills was leadership and training programs. Whereas support for students in need, that's really financial assistance for those that need support out there. So there's a lot of difference in where your members are focused. It's not for me, and it's not for the survey to dictate where your priorities should be in fundraising. It absolutely not. And all I wanted to highlight is where you might find the easiest road in for fundraising, where you're likely to get them, where you have the most awareness and you might likely get enough support. If something on this list has low awareness and you want it to have higher awareness, then once again, I'm so thrilled about the people on this call, because you talking about these as your future plans and your priorities are going to immensely facilitate that process in making sure that people are aware of those priorities going forward. So fundamentally, talking about the capital campaign and its goals is going to have a huge impact on awareness and, by extension, program giving and activity. But as will come as no surprise, given some of the other slides that I've shown you before, there's a big awareness division between donors and non-donors. If I convert those, the question was originally asked on a 1 to 7 scale. So here I'm returning that question to that form. You'll notice how much more aware donors are of what's of programs and services than non-donors are, right? So there's a barrier here again. The awareness becomes a difficulty in order to engaging your members and getting them participated. The more aware they are, the more likely they are to give fundamentally. We asked respondents why they gave. The number one answer, which is almost always the number one answer in fraternal fundraising, is they feel a sense of gratitude. They feel positive about the impact that your organization has had on their lives, and so they want to give back. They give out an action of gratitude. But notice that whereas normally number 2 is to support the impact that members have on society, in your case, your number 2 is actually to support current undergraduates. There's a real focus among your members, for whatever reason. Again, the survey is not sensitive enough to highlight that. There's a real interest in supporting current undergraduates. Again, I'm not trying to dictate where your fundraising priorities should be. I'm just highlighting where your alumni are in their perceptions and thinking for you. That doesn't mean that supporting the impact of members on society isn't important to them. It is important to many. Supporting the chapter is also important. Staying connected. These are all important things. But I'm looking for the easiest inroad where you could go. What is a significant motivator to their most recent contribution to Kappa Delta Rho? And you can see here, this is the same question, but broken out by money. Big dollar donors are much more focused on something, right? The big dollar donors, those giving over 1,000, are really strongly giving out of gratitude, or they're really focused on supporting current undergraduates compared to donors at the lower end. The small gift donors, even though I'm not diminishing the importance of their gifts, but they don't feel as linked to these issues as the big dollar donors are. And that is something that we want to also address, because it's possible that these small dollar donors have a lot of potential that they could throw your way, and we want to make sure that they get maximized over time. So of course, I've talked a bit about what caused a donor to give to the first time. Now I want to talk about why a donor might happen to leave. I'm going to go back in the database to set this up a little bit. This is a comparison of the number of, oh, I'm sorry, there's a question, and maybe I'll do that. A question from Joe. Can I define support? Joe, are you asking me in terms of defining support? Just, sorry, give me a little bit more information.
Yeah, so when you say support, we're not talking scholarships, we're talking direct support to help them be able to afford to be part of fraternity, or are we talking scholarships?
Well, it could take, it's so broad. It's so broad that you could define it however you want. What members are recognizing is that students are under incredible financial pressure, and that is further aggravated by COVID and issues of mental well-being. And so in that environment, and this is true of all fraternities, there's a greater interest in backing, in making sure that students have the ability to continue with their studies and be and be sound of mind and productive and function in the world. Now, it would be completely up to you as an organization how that was enacted, right? So I wouldn't want to overframe that in any kind of way. So,
but one could say needs-based scholarships could be part of that, or it's not really academic but needs.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You could absolutely be needs-based scholarship would work. You equally could have an entire other, and I know. And that's kind of implied in the way the survey was constructed. Another category for scholarships for individual merit, you know, a particular, a AAA, sorry, I'm Canadian, so I don't know SAT scores, whatever a high SAT score might be, you know, some 1,500 or whatever it happens to be. You know, you have a student who doesn't have the financial capacity to go, but has lots of, is clearly strong in academic achievement. That would be an equal category. The awareness for you supporting individual excellence is much higher than supporting students who maybe are in financial need, crisis, need emotional support, all those kind of programs. That's the difference between the two. So talking about what keeps a donor giving, if I have a look at the number of donors who you have acquired in the last 5 years. So these are first-time brand new people. So these are first donors. We don't see any history of their giving. You can see that in the last 5 years, the number has fluctuated quite a bit, but there is a slight tendency apart from 2018 where there's a big push to drop down. This is following the pattern that we're seeing with fraternities generally in terms of new donor acquisition. Even though the numbers are very small, I very much want to hold on to these donors and keep them giving for as long as possible. When I look at a pool of brand new donors, I meet in a database setting. I immediately then say, all right, we have, let's say we have 50 people who make a first gift today. How many of them are still giving 1 year from now? How many hold on for us in 1 year's time? And here are the statistics. Over the last 4 years where we had full data, in some years you've managed to hold on as many as 34%, 28%, but in other years it's only been 15%, 16%. So there's a fair bit of fluctuation of how many new donors keep giving for more than 1 year. And remember, these are only new donors. If I take all your data from the last 4 years and amalgamate it, you get a really interesting pattern. Kappa Delta Rho is in green and other fraternities are in blue. If I just look at what's happened over the last 4 years, and I imagine I got 100 brand new donors today, I would only expect that 18 or 19 of them are still giving next year in 12 months' time. But those people who stay, boy, do they stay, right? You know, once I get them over that first year hurdle, suddenly 98% of them give again in the second renewal year, 88% are giving in the third renewal year, 82 in year 4. And again, here's another area where once you've locked somebody in as a donor and got them past that first year hump, man, they stick, and they stick better with you than they do with almost any other fraternity in the study. In fact, I'm sure you have the best renewal year 2 scores of anybody in the entire group. So if you are thinking about who needs to be reinforced, if you're thinking about where you need to invest resources, those first-time people, and especially you're about to get a lot of new donors because of your capital campaign, this is where you want to put your time and energy, right? Keep those first-time people giving, because like any kind of investment, it compounds over time. On average, a first-time donor gives a gift of $73.37 if I take out all the big gifts, if I just, so I don't get a lot of outliers here. The average first-time gift is $73.37. Next year, the average goes up to 108, then it's 142, then 324. So that's the average. But if we're accumulating it, a donor who stays with you for 3 renewal cycles is suddenly worth almost $650 to you. So a donor that stays with you naturally gives more and gives more over time and tends to keep upgrading. They tend to be more valuable to you. So keeping a donor causes them to compound. So we want to hold on to these people as long as possible. Again, I've only included people here who give less than $5,000 because I want to take out the outliers. Some of these people will jump into a major contribution, right? Some of them will jump into a major donation after a couple of years as well. And we want that, but I've not put them in this calculation. If I were to run a hypothetical scenario based on your statistics, and you got 500 new donors today, I know that's more than you have historically gotten, but with your campaign, things may change. And it's a nice round number, honestly, and I could easily compare you to the other fraternities. You can see the pattern that develops over time. You get 500 new donors today, the drop is all in year 1, and then it sort of trickles out. So the whole game, is won and lost on year 1. How many of those first-time donors can we hold on? So that's where we want to invest our time and resources. And what can we do to ensure that these first-time supporters, of which I expect you to get a lot in your forthcoming campaign, can be held on to? Well, that's all about stewardship and communication. So if I look at the historical patterns of giving and what your donors are saying to us they will do over the next 12 months, this is the same question I put on before, but here I'm looking at intentions to give based on dollar figure. So if I have a big donor giving more than $1,000, almost 84% of them said, yes, I'm definitely going to give again. Most of the weakness is under the 1,000+ group, right there. That's the group that's less confident. The big donors, you're going to hold on to. It's the lower value donors that are more likely to ebb away. Well, there's a number of things that you as an organization are doing spectacularly well. All right. And because you're doing so many things good, it kind of limits your options of where you can actually improve things. So let me very quickly tell you the things that you're doing really great. Your thank you letter communication, great scores over 6 or near 6 for most categories. If there is any objection from lower value donors, is that they wish those thank you letters were more personalized, right? That sense of personal connection. And that's not surprising. But your average scores for between $100 and $999 are 6.1, above 1,000, 6.3. Donor lists. Your donors are saying to us, I will give more because my name appears alongside other supporters of the fraternity. And that's perfectly in keeping with the community that you're trying to develop and build. People feel a connection. They want to be part of the community. They give as an act most of gratitude and to remain linked. And so donor list, making it clear that you're part of a community that's giving. To my mind, I'd want to say part of a community that's giving and achieving something specific, but donor lists are very impactful. And members are saying to us in the survey that they are going to have a big impact on their giving value and size. Likewise, many respondents, particularly high value respondents, said that they were going to be prepared to give more in response to a giving society. These graded giving societies, I'm in the gold or the platinum club things. Your members also feel those are inspiring. Many of them said they would give more. A lot of them said no influence, but that's okay. If you get a good chunk of them to move up, that's perfectly fine. So these are all things that work well and are effective. Alumni events are also effective. People were saying to us in the survey, more likely to give, slightly more likely to give more. The only problem with alumni events, well, at the moment you can't get anybody into them because of COVID, but in normal circumstances you can't get as many people in as you'd like. It's very difficult to get everybody into those events. You might send out a lot of invitations and only get a small percentage. But even just inviting people makes them feel connected, even if they can't attend. Even following up with them afterwards to provide them highlights to tell them about what decisions were made at those events, where your future plans were, where the connection's going to be. That's all going to be appreciated, and it does motivate connection and sense of giving inside the organization. So with so much working well, the only thing that is kind of left is this communication piece on what happened with the donation. And when we ask people about how much influence they think their donations are having on KDR, we get a disparity, as always, between donors and non-donors. So we want the non-donors to be higher. But to my mind, the donors themselves are not showing a strong enough response. In most situations where I ask a question similar to this about how much impact they think a donation is going to have on an organization, usually we would see scores of 6.3, 6.4, particularly from donors. So donors are not connecting their donation to an outcome well enough. That's the missing link. That's the only thing that it seems to be lacking in your stewardship activities. And so I do want to say that your members, however, your donors, would be very, very happy to hear from you on this subject. We asked respondents in the study how interested they would be, if they were donors, on getting a program update in one of the following ways, like an annual one-page report or a letter on a specific program, acknowledgement from students, a tour when that's possible, webinars, things like that. I don't need these scores to be 100%. I just need them to be reasonably large enough to tell me that donors would be motivated by this, because even if a donor is not interested in it, there's enough people out here who would care about getting an update report. What happened with my gift? How did it impact the organization? That would make them feel, that would help address this issue about comprehension. What's happening inside the organization and how are gifts being applied? Having all that information, giving that information to them in a targeted, personal, short fashion will be very much appreciated by many of your donors. And I think even those who might not have responded positively to this question, when you provide it to them, they will like seeing it nonetheless. And again, it's only a page or two, but it's the ability to get this information in. And you may remember from earlier on that when we looked at whether or not people were overwhelmed by communication from the national office, they weren't feeling overwhelmed by how much information you were sending them. They were saying that they were satisfied. So there is space. There is space for, a 1-page or a 2-page specific update on how I use donations and what impact it has on the organization. Before I go to my very final section, I promise you're almost done with me, though I've appreciated the questions as we go. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask at this stage?
Jeff, I do.
Hi, Mark.
Hi. It was interesting to me, you were talking about the giving societies. I can recall probably about 3 years ago going to an FFE meeting up in Indianapolis.
Yes.
I might have even crossed paths with you up there. What I found interesting at the time was one of the sessions, there were several comments about people, donors at that time, didn't want to be seen as part of a giving society. They want you to know that they gave. They want to know Bill Paris gave, but they don't need to know Bill Paris was a golden Jubilee boy versus me who, I couldn't afford a Bitcoin if I wanted. Is that changed? That kind of surprised me.
Sure. No, sure. Let me speak to this. Now I don't know what the session was that you heard, because
it was not Cygnus. I know that. Yeah, I do remember.
So there's a very important, and forgive me for sort of going a little bit off track. In almost every survey that we do outside of fraternities and Harvard Business School, and I've worked with Harvard Business School, I say to the client, get rid of your giving society, get rid of your donor list. Nobody likes them. People don't care about whose name's on them. Eliminate them completely. These are not relevant to your members, and they're taking up a lot of your time and a lot of your resources. But you are the exception, the fraternal world and Harvard Business School, because in these environments where community and connection is so important, that's what the driver is. The member base is looking for a way to demonstrate their continued connection to you. And so it may not be important for Jeff to see that Mark gave, but it's important that Mark sees himself alongside of the community of people who are contributing, and that is the motivator. So no one wants to no one wants to feel bad about, that they have small, relative smaller capacity to give. That's not the message. I'm not encouraging, a very restrictive giving society where you have to, pass through the golden gates in order to, you know what I mean? What I'm saying is that, and I love giving societies that are based on longevity, not value. Right. So, you've been a consistent donor for 5 years, what a commitment to you, whatever it was within your means, you're part of that. Those are the things that are impactful. And it may be because our national research, we do national surveys at Cygnus every year on the state of fundraising, and always out of those surveys, giving societies and donor lists come up poorly. And it may be that the comments at this conference, I'm totally speculating, reflect that kind of scenario. But when I look at fraternities, sororities specifically, it's a different picture. And you can't believe the arguments in our office. I literally mean this. We have fights in our office about why it is that fraternities look so different, because it's such a change from what we're seeing everywhere else in the fundraising world. Completely different.
I appreciate that. It helps me put that a little more in perspective. So thank you.
Thank you for the great question and for letting me go on about it too. For that. Right. So look, I know we're half past, but I think there was some time built in for a little bit more questions, and I will move through this quickly and get a Q&A for everyone, because this is
Jeff,
really.
Jeff, this is, and we have till noon.
We have, okay, so I'm okay. I'm all right. All right, so I promise I won't use up all that time. So this final section on future contributions, because I think this is a particularly exciting section, because this is where I hope to prove to you that your current donors could give you more money and will tell us how we can unlock it. So we asked respondents in the study, do you give to any other charity other than Kappa Delta Rho in the last 12 months? So this is just a general question. Do you support anybody with a charitable gift? And you'll remember that I said early on, 1.9% of your alumni are giving to you. Well, unfortunately, 77% of your alumni are also giving somewhere else. So there's lots of experience with philanthropy elsewhere. 77.8% of Kappa Delta Rho members are contributing to charities in the last year. So there's definitely experience with contributions out there. And when we asked this question, it wasn't just throwing, $5 into a Salvation Army bucket. We said to them, do you expect to get a tax receipt for that donation? So a formalized donation process is the way we tried to structure it. So there's definitely experience with giving. And on average, those members are giving 6 to 6.6 other charities. So the average number of charities that people are supporting is 6.6. If they're already giving to you, their average numbers of charities that they're supporting is closer to 8.7. I say this because you'll remember I showed you a slide earlier where people said that they were prioritizing other charities. I want to reinforce this notion that it's not just one charity that they're interested in the world and they don't consider anybody else. That people give to lots of different things all the time, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be part of that group. How can we ensure that group, that you get included in that collection of charitable organizations? So for the donors in the study who are currently giving to Kappa Delta Rho, we then said, right, you give to KDR and you give to lots of other charities. Now, I'm not going to ask you which ones specifically or to tell me exactly how much, but could you rank Kappa Delta Rho for me? Is KDR the group that gets the most generous support from you? Are they in your top third, the middle third, or your bottom third? And your statistics are fairly consistent with what we see with other fraternities. It may be a little bit lower, a little bit higher. The margin of error would cover that. So I don't want to highlight some big disparity here. You're fairly consistent with what we see with other fraternities in this study, with about half of people saying you're in the top or most generous category, and pardon me, maybe closer to 60%, and about 40% saying you're in the middle or the bottom third. If I take this same question and break it out by the value of the donation they have made, so how big a gift they've made to you, what you immediately see is that the 1,000+ donors are highly likely to put you in the top third category or the most generous. And that's good, because what that tells me is that the donors who you're getting big gifts out of, you're already likely maximizing. So you're doing a good job with many of the 1,000+ people already there, getting them to give you a gift that is similar to what they might give somewhere else, right? So you're doing a good job with 1,000+ people. Notice that the donors under 1,000, the blue bars and the purple bars, are much more populated in the middle third or bottom third category. We have more people saying that you're more of these lower value donors saying to us in the survey that you're not getting the biggest gift. And you might say to me, well, Jeff, does it matter if we, so long as we get the big donors in, does it matter if we don't get these smaller value donors into the pool? And I'm going to say to you, yes, because of the next slide. I'm going to show you the national statistics for the survey, and then I'm going to show you KDR statistics for the survey, because this is true of every fraternity in the research. Nationally, when we ask this series of questions, and your statistics look very similar as a distribution to the national pool, what we find is that donors who say that they give a biggest gift to a fraternity have on average made a gift of the value, which is around $2,711. So if donors said to us in the survey, they make a gift, that they make their biggest gift to their fraternity, I go into their database, I have a look at what that biggest gift was, and then I put it in this graph, and the average value was $2,700. And as the respondent says, top third, middle third, bottom third, as I would expect, the value of the gift drops, right? Because they're saying a fraternity is a lower priority. So the average value drops down from $2,700 to $1,400 to $464 to $202. But the average amount of money they report giving to some other charity out there does not fall. In fact, it starts climbing. So that so the max gift they report giving to some other charity and have given to their fraternity is very, very similar. But as we move from top to middle to bottom, the gap opens up. This huge wideness opens up. So donors who report giving an average to their fraternity $202, forgive me, not even report, I know this for a fact because I looked it up in their database, have given to it an average of $202, report giving almost $5,000 to other charities. These are all the people making small gifts, right? All the $1 to 99 people, the $100 to $999. Donors in the study who seem to have low capacity because of the value of their contributions, in reality do not. They're just allocating it somewhere else. They're making big gifts to other charities. So these are the national statistics. I'm going to show you yours as well, but because when we ask questions about how much money you give, we get quite a few dropouts in those questions, and so the pattern is a little bit more uneven. I can't get as big a sample as I would normally want, and so I wanted to show you both statistics. So here is KDR's specific results. Your max gift value, your donors report their maximum gift to another charity is $1,600. When I look in your database, their average was $2,600. At the top third, when I look in your database, their average gift to you is $2,700, but their reported giving elsewhere is $5,600. The middle third, the bottom third, the same pattern produces. And in fact, we had one or two people in the bottom third category reporting very big gifts. I even capped this at $50,000 to eliminate outliers. This is bizarre, but fantastic news, right? What I am saying is that donors you already have immense more capacity out there. They just haven't unlocked it to you yet. They have the ability to give. They have a history of giving to you, but they've not unlocked that big gift yet. You can access more funds from these donors that you already have, right? I'm not saying you don't want more donors, of course you do, but the people who are there right now can be upgraded. And we see this in this slide. We know that it's a trend nationally everywhere. And we see this way back in the very first, one of the very first demographic slides I presented to you, which was this slide of household income, where we had a whole bunch of people reporting household income, but we know have made relatively high household income, but we know that they have made relatively small contributions to KDR. There's a real untapped potential here. So now the only question is, how do we get it out? Well, we asked them that bluntly. What could we do in order to motivate a bigger gift from you? Again, it's a small sample. when we're at this point in the survey, but this lines up with what we're seeing in the national statistics, things people want to give to, compelling project or campaign. So this is why I'm saying all the way through, I know your campaign is going to be successful because there's untapped potential there. Matching gift programs are very compelling. Better information on case, more information on how the last gift was used, and asked by someone I respect. Now, I'm not trying to charge everyone in this call to go out and become fundraisers. What I want to do is encourage you to talk about the organization and its mission. And the fundraising staff can ask for the money. What you can do is be part of that process by being strong advocates for what the mission is. I mean, if you feel like asking and you feel well positioned, then more power to you. But that will really help facilitate this upgrade, move more of these donors who you have now, who are giving small gifts relative to what they could do, and elevate them through your program. One final note about giving and designation, then I'll end. One of the things we like to ask people in the survey is where they would like to give their donations, what is a priority for them, where would they like to designate a gift in future. So those people in the survey who said to us, yes, I'm prepared to give again sometime this year, we said, great. Where would you like to designate it anywhere? If you had the choice, would you give it to some area in particular at KDR? And they could pick more than one thing, right? They're allowed to pick as many things as they want in this question. So what I want to highlight for you, first of all, is that most of your donors said to us, or most of the people who intend to give said to us, oh yeah, I trust KDR. You can put it where you think best. You know, I'm very happy to make an unrestricted gift. And that's by far and above the number one response here. Other things that come up that are a priority, student support, skills training, lots of things that we would expect to see. I like this because it allows you to say, it means that there's a lot of trust there. So you don't need to necessarily ask for a hard designation for a contribution, but you can also tie it to something if you want. And the reason why you might want to tie it to something is because of this next slide. Here we asked respondents if they would be prepared to upgrade the value of their contribution in response to a specific designated gift. And we get different percentages at different categories. And we said, if you were willing to upgrade the value of your contribution, how much would you like to increase it by? Would you increase by 50%? Would you increase by 25%? Would you increase by 10% or 50% or more? What you'll notice is that things like support for students, which is at the top, 15% of respondents who are interested in that category said that they would give a 25% increase in the value of their gift if they could direct it there. And another 11% said they'd increase by 10% of their value of their gift if they could direct it there. Special projects does well, external mission does well, skills training does well, lots of things do well. Always the weakest category is unrestricted giving. All right. I mean, it's maybe not the perfectly weakest category here, but generally speaking, if I look at the overall pool of fraternities, unrestricted giving gets the least traction. So I know that by asking for a gift for something specific, you're likely to unlock naturally more money. But that doesn't mean you have to go hard on designation to achieve it. Some of the ways I've seen organizations do this successfully is to say to their alumni, perhaps in an annual fund appeal, these areas this year are a priority for my organization. This is what we're fundraising for. Maybe it's student support. And if you'd like your gift to be, and maybe they had a couple things, student support or a capital program, special scholarships. And if you'd like your gift to be focused in that area, please check a box, or if you don't mind, and we'll use it to our best of our abilities, here's a fourth box that you could pick, and we'll allocate where we feel best. But at the back end, I will report to you about our priorities for this year. So I've decided, we at KDR have decided that these are going to be our priorities for fundraising for this year. And we raise money with that as an intended focus. And at the back end, we report back to those donors what we did, what the impact was on those contributions. And by doing so, without making it too tight in a designated area, knowing that lots of people are going to give to unrestricted, you help close the loop. You give donors information about how their gift was used, what your priorities were, where you want to go as an organization. You naturally cause gifts to upgrade, but you're not caught by not being able to allocate funds in particular ways that are important to you. What I'm interested in is making sure you can tell the donors something at the back end specific, that you can say to them, this is how we allocated funds this year. This is the programs that we supported, and this is the change that we have created. And if you do that, it makes it easier to hold on to that donor and upgrade them over time. So roughly 1 in 5 of your supporters are prepared to increase the value of their contribution by 25% or more if you can tell them more about how that gift is going to be allocated. Give them some sense of designation. Give them some information about an area that they feel is personally important to them. And you don't have to fear it, because most of your donors are going to say to them, yeah, you put it where you want. I trust you. I trust you as an organization. You can put it as you want. But getting information about where people's priorities are help you communicate more effectively, target things, make everything feel more personal, and make them feel more connected. And I'm sure you're very glad that was the very last slide. So thank you very much for listening to all that. I know that's a lot of information to take in, but again, I'm very happy to answer questions, talk about anything tactical that you would like regarding how some of this might be put into action.
Jeff, can I ask a question about that last point?
Yes, please.
So I work at a university, and so we struggle with that issue of whether they are undesignated gifts or designated gifts.
Yes.
And what has burned us in the past, that a significant part of our endowment is designated gifts. And so when we have an issue like COVID, our ability to move money into the current priorities is severely limited. And so it's a dangerous thing to tightly designate those gifts.
Yes.
And,
yes, I agree.
And while you suggest that the majority of those gifts will still come in undesignated, that's not guaranteed.
No, it is not guaranteed. But a couple to your point. I'm not encouraging a very tight designation. What I'm encouraging is funding priorities. So I'm encouraging you to talk about, these are the mission priorities that we have for the next 12 months, so that people know where you are as an organization going, so that you have something you can talk about on the back end, so that you definitely can say to them, this is where I'm going as an institution. And COVID issues aside, and I completely take that this is an extraordinary situation. What you can always do if you're concerned about this is not, in the first instance, offer designation to everybody. You could segment some of your donor base, test it with 10, 20%, and see what the fallout was, and then you could extrapolate to the remainder. And of course, your capital campaign is one giant designation exercise, right? You have mission priorities that you're fundraising for, and they will be allocated in that place. So I'm not trying to box you in, and I never want a situation where, oh, you gave me $5 and I needed to buy a light bulb and it cost me $5, so I have to, that's not. We all get, we know the reality of the situation, but the issue is so clear with KDR that there's just not enough understanding about how gifts are being used and applied, that we have to give them something to latch onto so that we can help them overcome this. So
the other part of it is where we are as an organization with the capital campaign. We are raising capital money to endow programs, and to show progress, we have to spend operating money on those programs. And so it's an interesting conundrum until we get the endowment built up to a place where it's sloughing off some income that we can spend.
Yes.
The priorities we're struggling with the priorities on the operating budget, and which means the annual fund at a point in time. And they're good programs. We want to be spending money in those areas, but it sort of keeps us on our toes.
No. And this can be a progressive change. You don't have to, if you can make small inroads, you'll get gains. The difficulty that many fraternities are facing is that this is the only real change open to their fundraising structure that they can take, right? That they can make a new inroad. So I know designation and specificity is often sometimes a difficult pill to swallow. But by finding ways to make it more comfortable for you as an organization, even progressively over time, that's the only realistic way you're going to actually start unlocking the big dollars. There's nothing else showing up in the data that I can latch onto you because you guys are not doing a bad job, right? You know, I mean, I have clients where the house is on fire and I go, my God, you know, we have to fix this. You're not in that situation, right? You know, you've got a good program that's a solid, stable, again, outperforming many other groups, good potential capital campaign coming down the road. And you know what, even if you threw out everything I said about designation and you decided not to let a single designated gift come through your door, I would even be just happy if at the end of the year you look back and said, this is what we did. And even if it's not the end of the road, you look back and said, this is what we did, and this is what we achieved, or this is what we got in place that will help us achieve. That will further facilitate those relationships.
So if I may make a suggestion, Gene. My diocese is in the middle of an endowment campaign as well, which limited my ability to impact our endowment as greatly as I may have wished. But you know, I much like we've been discussing, right? We support multiple things. But the way they got around this issue, Gene, is they made very broad designations. So they had these like 3 pillars, and for the life of me, I can't remember the third pillar, but they called one foundations and charity, right? Helping the poor, you know, homeless, feeding the hungry, etc., right? Charity. Then they had another educational one, skills training, Catholic education, supporting schools, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was a third pillar. And like I said, for the life of me, it's not coming to me. But they're broad enough that you fit a lot of programs underneath each of those umbrellas, such that you can designate without necessarily hampering yourself. And Gene, I know exactly where you're going, because we have a lot of people that have designated donations to a specific chapter, right? That then sort of hamper our ability to use that more broadly. But we could think about things like that potentially.
No, Scott, and I'm just going to echo what you said. I mean, there's a difference between designating priorities and designating to specific funds.
Yes.
And so, you know, because there are, you know, by designating to specific priorities that are already within the programming structure that we have, that doesn't necessarily restrict the gift, as opposed to saying, you know, will you donate to the Scott Smaniotto Alpha Beta Scholarship, which is obviously a very restricted designation.
Any other questions, topics? I know it's a lot to take in, and you often need to sit back with it for a while and then return to the data later.
Hey, Jeff, I'm going to pop in with a question, and I don't know how confidential the information is. At one point, there was a discussion that there were 49, I think I saw it said there were 49 respondents
Yes, to that question.
they were open to more substantial, they give to others much more substantially. Do we have the individual participants or respondents where we've been able to flag them in our database?
Because of confidentiality, we assure everybody anonymity in the survey, because it's a segment of your population, it would only give you a very small window into what the whole thing was. But we have provided a full list of everyone who participated in the survey, so you can identify that. You can identify them in your database, and I appreciate where you're trying to go. So I don't even know personally who they are by name. I only have a number, but if you just take the same process and extrapolate it out, the odds of probability will eventually get you there. You know, we'll cause them to unlock. So, and because it's just a small segment of the overall group, only 7%, there's many more out there well beyond this little pool that we've got, right, that I'd want you to be able to access as well. But I would encourage, you know, you have the names of everybody. If you don't have the names, just ask me and I'll make sure you got them to it, but they're in your big data file of everybody who's in the study. And you can always communicate with them out there on the assumption that they're big donors. In fact, this is the Many charities that we work with don't do this, but if they just start communicating with them on the assumption that person could give big because of what you're seeing on the screen in front of you, it makes it, you naturally then find the big donors because you're taking a run at them, not by looking at the fact they gave $50 last time. You assume they have $9,756 they could give. And you start from there. And they'll very quickly tell you if they can't, right? There's no question they'll turn you down if they can't do it. But we were working with, we've had much like fraternities, we've worked with the YMCA nationally for the last decade on fundraising support. And we had done a survey much like this one, had very similar graphs to this one here about how much more these donors could give. And we said to the YMCA as a test with them, we want you to go out and we want you to ask every single donor in your file for a gift that was 4 times bigger than the last gift they gave. And they totally freaked out. They completely freaked out at the suggestion. All the fundraisers just panicked. And they were so panicked that we said, all right, calm down. We'll let you go out and ask for just a gift that was double the value of the last gift they gave. And across this test, we had a test group and a control group. And across this test, the centers that did that increased revenue by 27%, right? So those that can't meet it will tell you no. And those that could will tell you yes. All we said is you must ask for bigger and you must ask for something specific, not designated. You've got to connect it to something inside the organization. And frankly, they would have gotten a lot more money if they'd asked to quadruple it like we wanted to. But that's the, sorry, Bill, that's a very long-winded answer to your question. But I don't want you to get caught on who specifically here is, because I know if you just go into that pool enough times, it will come out to your favor. Right? So, you're the house, you win, right? You know, that's the kind of.
Are there any other questions? All right, well, if not, I'd like to thank Jeff for taking the time and presenting this information. You know, like I said, he gave us a lot to think about, a lot to chew on. I would especially like to thank the non-trustees who came and participated and took time out of their Saturday morning to listen to the findings and to get more insights. I think this is great. You know, the trustees at least had some obligation to be here. This is our day to go through a lot of strategic thinking and education. And you know, the trustees, we will reconvene in Zoom at 1 o'clock Eastern time. But for the rest of you, thanks so much for participating. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions following this up, you can either reach out to me, you can reach out to Joe. This has been recorded. And so if there are things that you think you remember and you want to go back to the recording to refresh your memory on these things, you know, it will be available. I'm not exactly sure in what format. It might be on the server, but we will send out a copy of the slides and a copy of the link to everyone. So again, thank you, Jeff. This has been great.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for the kind comments as well as we go. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend it with me and absorb all this on a Saturday morning. I hope you have a great rest of your discussions and best of luck for your campaign. You guys are going to smash it, I know. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.